Hi guys, my name is Arya and I welcome you all to this live session. Today we are going to build a simple CRUD application, which normally stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete, using jQuery. Now, keeping time constraints in mind, our project is going to be simple enough to understand, but nonetheless it's going to be a pretty polished application. So our app is going to be built using HTML, CSS and jQuery. And now let me just give you a sneak peek into what our project, which is a to-do list, will look like. So our project is going to look something like this. It's actually a pretty polished application in my opinion. So this is a to-do list, and the first thing that I want to point out is that it's a very responsive app. It responds to how your web page is actually sized and stuff. Above that, it also has a few basic functionalities. First of all, like a general to-do list, if you have done a task, you can strike it off. So when you strike it off, you get a line through and this turns green. And if you are already done with this task, you also have the option of completely deleting it from the list. Secondly, you can also put in new tasks, like something like, hi, this is a new task, and it'll get added. And the same functionalities are also updated to this updated element dynamically. So things that were not already on our page also get the functionalities that it deserves. So basically you can strike this off, you can delete it, and so on. Above that, you can also, you see this input method out here, this input where you can put in your text. You can hide this by actually clicking this button out here. Now we are going to do actually perform all this using jQuery and on some very smart CSS. So before we actually start coding, let's get down to the basics. Now, before we actually get in, let me just tell you guys what we're actually going to learn today. So firstly, I'm going to give you guys an introduction to jQuery, and then we're going to see why we actually use jQuery in our day-to-day lives while programming. Then we're going to take some attention to a few jQuery methods that are very important for this project. And in the end, it's going to be a code-along session in which we create the to-do list that I just showed you. Okay, so let's get started. So what exactly is jQuery? Well, jQuery is a fast, small, and feature-rich JavaScript library. It makes things like HTML document traversal and manipulation, event handling, animation, and Ajax much simpler with an easy-to-use API that works across a multitude of browsers. Now, with a combination of versatility and extensibility, jQuery has changed the way that millions of people write JavaScript. So why exactly are we going to use jQuery? Well, sometimes a question can arise that what is the significant difference that jQuery is actually bringing than over something like vanilla JavaScript, which is JavaScript without any framework? So the following are the reasons that we normally use jQuery. So first of all, it's a very fast and extensible framework. And secondly, it facilitates the user to write UI-related function codes in minimum possible lines. Thirdly, it improves the performance of an application by a large scale, and then it's also compatible on multiple browsers, and it uses mostly new features of every browser that you can possibly think of. So you can say that out of the lot of JavaScript frameworks, jQuery is the most popular and the most extendable one. Many of the biggest companies on the web using jQuery are Microsoft, Google, IBM, and even Netflix. So if you guys want an even more detailed tutorial on jQuery, we already have that up on YouTube. You can just go on YouTube and type jQuery tutorial Edureka, and the first video will be the tutorial that goes through jQuery in an expansive fashion and goes through most of its functions. Now, to actually learn jQuery, you can basically go through that video, but you could also code along with me today in this to-do list. Now, before we move ahead, let me just go through a few of the functions that are going to be very specific to our to-do list today. So the first function that we are going to see is the event.stop propagation function. So there's this thing called an event propagation in the document object model. So when an event is triggered, it actually climbs through the document object model until it reaches the complete parent element, that is the doc type element. So you'll see a very good demonstration of what I mean just when we are coding. Above that, we are also going to be using the .parent function. So the .parent function normally returns the parent element from the HTML for a defined selector. So it's a pretty easy method to use, and you'll see when we actually use it. So now let's actually start coding. So our coding will start with the HTML. So firstly, let's have a look at what we are trying to create out here. So firstly, we have this to-do list, which is actually H1 out here, this to-do list part. Then there's this button out here, which is the plus button. Then we have an input part, which is a text type input. And then we have this unordered list of 3 tasks that come preloaded whenever you load the page. So it's a pretty simple HTML, and actually let's start creating it without wasting much time. So first of all, I'd like all of you watching this video to actually open up your most favorite text editor. For me, I'm going to be using Sublime Text. So first of all, let's go out here and actually create a folder. Now I'm also going to teach you guys how to actually create an industrial level folder. So when you are actually making a project for a client, suppose, this is how you would present your code to the client. So firstly, let's create a few files. So we are going to have this folder called the assets. Now inside assets, we are going to create 2 new folders called CSS, and the second will be called JavaScript. In the JavaScript also, we are going to be creating a new folder called library. And in this library part, we are going to store all the frameworks that we're going to be using. So basically jQuery. Now let's go and open up this folder in Sublime Text. So firstly, let's see, let me open Sublime Text first. Okay, I already have some code out here. Well, let's see. Let's remove all of this. No, I don't want to save the changes. Let's remove this. Let's remove this. And let's remove this. Let's remove folder from the project. Now we're going to create and open a new folder. So go to open folder, and then we just select this. So we've selected our folder and opened it as a project. So in Sublime Text, there is this view where you can see your complete project tree out here. So you can see all the libraries and all the files that you're going to be creating. So firstly, let's create the HTML. So set your file type to HTML out here, and let's get started. So firstly, let's create a boilerplate for HTML, and we are going to call this a to-do list. So to-do list. Fine. Let's save this, and this is going to be saved in the main folder. So let's go to desktop, go to demo, and let's name it index.html. Now once we've done that, let's also create our CSS file. So for CSS, we just set this to CSS and just save the file. So this is going to be saved in your assets file, where it's going under the CSS folder. So we're going to be calling this styles.css. Next, we need to create our JavaScript file. So just select JavaScript and save it. So we go CSS, no, not CSS. So to-do list, desktop, demo, assets. So under the JavaScript folder, we are going to be storing our script, and we'll be calling a script. Now all we have to do is connect these 3 first. So firstly, let's connect our CSS file. Now it's actually under the assets folder, which is then going to go into the CSS folder, and our file is called styles.css. Fine. To see if we've actually connected properly, let's actually try out some CSS. So select body and give it some, let's say background is going to be purple. So save that, and let's open our file. Okay, so we have a purple background, so that means we've successfully connected our style sheet. Next, what we have to do is connect our script. So we go and put in our script tag, and we have to put in the source. So our source is basically going to be asset/JavaScript, and it's going to be called script.js. Now to see if our JavaScript has actually connected properly, we are just going to throw a normal alert. So it's going to say connected. So if this connects properly, this should now say connected. So yeah, we've connected our JavaScript properly, we've connected our CSS properly. So now we're good to go. Let's remove this for now because we don't really need a background called purple. And we'll remove this too because we don't need to actually alert ourselves every time. Now it's time we start creating our HTML. So let's analyze what we have to actually make. So if you see this out here, this to-do list part is actually an h1. So let's create that first. So we go h1 and we say to-do list. Fine. Then after that, we have this button, but we'll take care of the button in a while. Now, after that, we have this input part, which is of type text. So all we have to do is get an input type going. And it's going to be of type text. We can remove the name attribute. But something that you should notice is that this has a placeholder which says add new task. So we go placeholder and say add new task. Simple. Then we have these three list items which are basically in an unordered list, and these actually signify our tasks that we are going to do throughout the day. So firstly, we go here and create an unordered list. Fine. So now we need three list items. So li, and let's say create HTML. Let me just copy this down. And let's make this create CSS and create JavaScript. Fine. Now let's see how this actually looks like. So this is going to be the bare minimum actually. So this is how our to-do list looks like without any JavaScript or any sort of CSS attached to it. It's very basic and does absolutely nothing. Now what we need to do to actually make our code a little bit more, let's say, modular. So we'll add some divs. So firstly, this div is going to be called a container. We're going to give it an ID of container because it's going to contain the entirety of our content. So we end the div there. Now let me just re-indent my lines. Above that, we will also need a div for this because we want to stylize our list later on, and having a div always helps. So let's give them an ID of task and let's end this here. Fine. Now that doesn't actually change our structure, just to give you guys a notice. So that's done. So we'll get to the styling bit, the latest part, like we'll do styling absolutely in the end. Let's go and add some functionality to our to-do list now. So this is going to be the beef of the entire content where your logic actually resides. So firstly, we need to add jQuery to our project. So to add jQuery, all we need to do is go to jQuery.com and download jQuery. So you go jQuery.com and you download jQuery from here. Click the download button and you'll see this thing called the download the compressed production of jQuery 3.3.1. So what we want to do is right click out here and save link as. Now where do we want to actually save this link? Well, if you've guessed it right, I'm pretty proud of you. You go to demo, you go to assets, you go to JavaScript, and you go to library. Now all you have to do is name this whatever you want. So I'm going to call it jQuery and we're going to save it there. So now that it's saved in the correct place, all we have to do is add it to our project. So we do it with the script tag. So our type is going to be text and JavaScript, and then we just have to add the source, which is going to be assets. Then we go into JavaScript, then we go into library, and in the end we are going to name our file. So it's going to be jQuery.js. Let's save it. And to test if jQuery has been actually included into your project, just reload. Open up the console by hitting Ctrl, Shift and J. So it should open up into your console, and just type in jQuery. If it returns an object like this, that means you have successfully included jQuery into your project. Okay, so now that we have successfully included jQuery into our project, let's start adding some functionalities to our to-do list. So let's analyze our project first. What do we need to add? So first thing that we need to add is this function. It's the strikethrough function. So basically, if you've done a task, you want it to become green and you want it to have a line through it. Now the other task that you need to add is that if you click this small part out here, okay, I forgot to add the small part actually. Let me go ahead and quickly add that. So these are going to be 3 spans because they are inline elements and they're going to be with our li. So we go span, and for now we're not going to include that trash can image. That is going to be another framework that we are going to be using called Font Awesome. So we'll get to that when we are styling stuff. But for now, let's just imagine that this squiggly little line actually signifies our trash can that we see out here, this one. So let's save that and let's reload it, and we have this squiggly little line going for us, right? So basically, when we actually hit the span or the squiggly little line out here, what should happen is that they should get deleted. So that's functionality number 2. Now functionality number 3 is adding new to-do lists. So suppose get milk. So get milk should get added as soon as you press enter on the to-do list, and this part that you see out here, the input part, gets completely blank. So we have to do all this stuff using jQuery. So let's get started. So move over to your JavaScript file and let's comment out the stuff that we actually need to do first. Firstly is the strikethrough functionality. Next is the deleting one. Next is adding. Now there's another functionality, which is this one, that this gets toggled out here, but we're going to be adding it later when we actually add this button using Font Awesome. So let's leave that out for now. Now let's actually study the logic of how we are actually going to approach this thing. So if you see, whenever I click on an li, which is a list item, the strike through happens and the text becomes green. So firstly, we need to select our li's. So how do we do selecting? Well, you go $, and you just say li, and then you want to add an event listener. Now there are 2 types of event listeners. One is called on, and the second one is called click. So for now, I'm going to be using the click function just to show you guys what the difference between click and on is later on. So just bear with me. So we say li, and on a click, you want to run a function. So this is called the callback function, which is the function that will run whenever you click on an li. So firstly, let's try something very simple. So let's say console.log. So listener has been set up. So every time we click on an li out here, this console should say that, yeah, you're clicking on an li. So let's just reload our page, and yep, listener has been set up. So our listener has been indeed set up properly. So it's time we add our logic. So what is exactly our logic? Well, when your li is clicked, it becomes green and there's a line through it. So for doing that, we have the .css function. So we select our element that has been selected with the this keyword first. Then we go .css, and we're going to pass in an object out here. So we say color is going to be green, and text decoration, which is another property of CSS, is going to be line through. Fine, let's save this. Let's see if this is actually running. Okay, it seems that we have an uncaught syntax error. So this is one mistake that I want to actually point out to you guys. So this is weird in JavaScript because JavaScript does not actually understand hyphens, while in CSS we do have a property called text decoration. So what do we do if we actually want to use it in JavaScript? Well, fret not, all you have to do is write it in camel case and it'll work. So let's save it, let's reload, and you see that our listener has been set up with the logic. Well, now if you go ahead and click it, it turns green and there's a line through it. But there's more to our functionality, because if you see out here, once we click it also, it becomes red and the line disappears. But if you do anything like that out here, like you click on HTML, nothing's really happening because we haven't added the logic for that. So our logic is going to be something like this. First of all, I'm sorry for that, I have a really bad cold. So it's going to be if your text is green, turn it black. So that's our basic if statement. So let's try and execute that first. So we say if this dot CSS. Now if we just pass the argument color without a second argument, it will retrieve the color property of this element, which is the li that has been clicked on. Now we want to check if it's equal to green, and if it's indeed green, what we want to do is, let's set that up. Yeah, now our brackets are set. Let me re-indent my lines. Yeah, so if our color is green, all we want to do is make it black, and we want text decoration to be none. Else, well, this is where the if ends, so else begins here. Else, all we want to do is, let's copy this thing down and paste it here. We want to do exactly the opposite. We want to turn it green, and we want our text decoration to have a line through it. So we go line through. Let's save that. Then you're going to see something weird happening. So this still works, but our logic is perfectly correct, but this is not working. So why is that? Well, let's try something out now. So let me just console.log we're going to console.log this dot CSS, and let's see how our colors are being actually returned to us. So let's save that, let's reload it. So you create HTML, and what you see out here is that our colors are being passed as an RGB stream instead of the word green. So this is why our if statement is not working. So if you actually click out here again, the RGB that we're trying to compare for is actually RGB 0, 128 and 0. So now if we just were to go and change this to RGB 0, 128, 0, our logic will start working because Chrome understands RGB and not the word green. So let's go ahead and reload it. Now if you click on HTML, it becomes green and there's a line through it. And if you click on it again, it kind of disappears. So that's how jQuery works with line through. But if you realize also something, that this kind of code doesn't really suit jQuery, because what the motto of jQuery is, you write less and you do more. So basically we can do all this in just a few lines of code. So let me just show you how that's possible. So let's delete everything, and first of all let's go to our CSS file. So I'm going to create a class called done, and this is going to have a color called green, and it's going to have a text decoration called line through. Now that we've set up the class and saved it, all we have to do is toggle it. Well, this is what I mean. You select your li again, and you say that every time you click, there's going to be a function running through it. So the function is going to be something very simple. All you want to do is toggle a class on your li. So this dot toggle class is a function. Now all you want to toggle is the class called done. So every time you click on it, jQuery itself will decide if the text is green or the text is black, and you basically wrote 10 lines of code in just, what do you say, 4 lines. So let's see if this works. Let's reload our page. Now if you click on create HTML, it goes green, and then you click on it again and it goes back to how it was. Then again you click on create CSS, it goes back to how it was again if you click it, and the same can be said for this third element. So basically we've added the first functionality of our to-do list very successfully. Now off to the second. So the second element is deleting. So basically this one. When you click on a span, it should get deleted. Now notice the way it also gets deleted. It's not exactly instant. It takes some time. It fades out and it's a very gradual process. So we have to achieve that too with jQuery. So let's get started. So first of all, we need to select the span element. So how do you exactly do that? Well, you go $sign and you say span. Now every time the span is being clicked, what do you want to do? Well, let's set that up first. You want to set up a function. And now we had discussed the parent element, the parent function, which returns the parent. So let me just show you the .remove function first and how it works. So all you want to do is say this .remove. So this will remove the element. Now notice something weird. If I click on the span, which is this squiggly little line out here, our create.js should get deleted, right? That's what we created that function for. But that's not exactly what is going to happen. Only the squiggly line part gets deleted, and we've also triggered the click event of the li. We really didn't want to do that, did we? But if you look at it from this perspective, the span that is there is also inside the li. Now we could also say that this li is inside this unlisted unordered list, and this unordered list is inside this div, and this div is inside the body, which is inside the HTML. Okay, so basically every time you click on an event on the screen like this, the event actually gets bubbled up through the DOM. So every parent element will also have a trigger going through it. Let me demonstrate something. So suppose we were to set up a listener. Now let's say we are going to say alert, the span was clicked. Now let me just copy this out for once, just for demonstration's sake. Let me comment this out. Now you'll see what I mean when I say that events actually bubble up. Now the li is what the parent, so the li is actually the parent of the span. So our click will get bubbled up to the li. So let's say alert, the li was clicked. Now what is the li in? The li is in the ul. So we can also add a ul. Make this ul. And you can also say the ul was clicked. And in the end, the ul is in the body. So you could add one for the body too. Let me just do that. So this is body, and you can say the body was clicked, right? Now all you have to do is, let's save it, and let me just show you something cool. Let's reload this page and watch what happens. I'll click the span and all the triggers will get triggered. So firstly it says the span was clicked, right? Out here it says the span was clicked. You click OK. It'll say that the li was also clicked, but we didn't really intend to do that. Then it'll say the ul was clicked, and then it'll say the body was clicked. So basically our event is bubbling up the DOM. Now we want to actually stop that from happening. So how do we actually do that? Well, if you were to go in and pass in an event object, which is the event that triggers this, and every event object comes with this function called stop propagation. I hope I'm spelling that correctly. So let's see. Now let's reload the page. Now if I click on the span, it just shows the span was clicked and the event stops bubbling up the DOM. So basically this is how our function event.stopPropagation is actually stopping the event from propagating up the DOM. Okay, so now that I've explained how event propagation works, let's get on to actually making our deleting functionality. Let me uncomment this first. Let's save it. And okay, now we need to select our span again because I deleted it. We select our span, we put the click functionality, and we pass in our callback function. Now in the callback function, what we want to do is remove the parent element. So basically when the span is clicked, we want to remove the entire li. This is where our parent function will come into use. So we say this dot parent dot remove. Let's save it and let's see if it works. Now if we click on the span out here, it should remove the complete create.js part, and we are successful. But we are still not there where we want to be. If you see, if I delete it here, it's a very gradual delete. So for that, we also have a function called fade out. Now if you just simply do dot remove dot fade out, or the other way around also, so we could say dot fade out dot remove, you'll see something weird happening again. Now if you see, if I click here, it still gets removed almost instantaneously. This is because our remove function is not actually waiting for the fade out to happen. Now we can actually solve this by putting this as a callback function. Now fade out takes two parameters. One, the milliseconds that the fade out will take, and second, the callback function. So let's say this takes around 200 milliseconds to get deleted, and then we also pass in a function. Now this function will do exactly what you're thinking, is it's going to remove the entire li. So we just go with this dot remove. Okay, another thing that is fundamentally very important to note is that this out here and this out here are completely different. The this out here refers to the span, while the this out here refers to the complete li, because we have already called it on the parent. So that is the this in this bracket. I hope that was not confusing for you guys. So now if we save it and we reload our page, it will have a very gradual delete. So yep, that's how you delete it. Now all we need to do is set the stop propagation thing. So we have to first pass the event, and then we say event dot stop propagation. Let's save that, and now that weird thing that happens where you click out here and this gets clicked out, that shouldn't be happening anymore. So this should be just a very gradual delete. Yep, it gets gradually deleted without actually marking it. Again, it gets gradually deleted, and we have successfully added our functionality for deleting our elements. Now the next functionality is the most interesting one. This will also show you how click and on are very different. So firstly, let's analyze. Let's go to the to-do list and see what happens. Let's reload this first. Now if you add something like LOL, it gets added. It has the trash can, it has all the functionalities, right? So basically when I press enter, the value that is in the input will be added as a to-do thing. So let's try and achieve that. So firstly, we need to select our input. So we select our input by just typing in input, because there's no other input form. So we can just simply type that out. Now what we say is key press. So because we are actually looking for a key press, and we'll pass in a function into this. Right. So let's see. Let's first console.log something very simple. So every time a key is pressed, we want to see you are typing on the keyboard. This will tell us that we've set up the event listener correctly. Let's reload our page and let's type in something. So you see, every time I hit a character on my keyboard, this number keeps going up. It'll be 30, now it'll be 40, and that's how it works. So this means we've actually set up our event listener very well. So moving on, it's time we added our logic. So what exactly is our logic? Well, every time you press the enter button, whatever is in the input field, the value part, will be put into the to-do part. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, firstly, we need to pass the event object again, because the event object also has this method called which lets us check out which key was actually pressed. So we say if event.which equals to 13, So 13 is the ASCII code for enter. We want to take everything in the input part and put it into our list. So let's open up our if brackets. First of all, let's create a variable called task, and this is going to take in our inputs value form. So input dot val will be stored in task, right? Next, what we want to do is we want to append whatever is in the value into a list. So this is how you do it. You want to select your UL first of all, the unordered list part, and then you want to append something. So append function will add some HTML content to it. So to do that very easily, just go ahead, select the span out here, go back to your JavaScript file, paste it. Now, well, you need to add some quotes. So this quote will be there, then this quote will be there here, and then there will be a quote here and here. We will simply remove the create JavaScript part and we'll replace it with our task, which is basically what we collected from the value part, right? So let's see if this works. Go out here, let's see, any random text, let's say milk. So milk gets added, but we also want this part to become blank, because if we add milk out here, this part becomes blank and it says add new task again. So that can be very easily achieved by just saying, let's just copy this down, and after we've appended it, what we want to do is set the value to blank. So just a quotation mark. So this should fix our problem. Okay, so let's try and add some milk now to our list. So milk is added and our input part gets cleared out. So basically we've added the basic functionalities. But I also want to bring to your notice that when we add milk and we click it, nothing really happens. This is because we have actually used the click function out here instead of the on function. Now the main difference between the click function and the on function is that click actually adds an event listener to elements that were on the page when the page was already loaded. So basically all the static elements can be handled with a click listener. But for things that are dynamically added to the page, like this milk object out here, we can't actually handle it with click. So basically this is where we need the on functionality. So basically we'll be actually listening for clicks all on our unordered list. So let me just show you how that works. So first of all, make this on. Next, we're going to look for clicks all around the unordered list. We're going to look for a click event and we're going to apply it on the li. So this is how you use the click functionality. Now if you go ahead and reload the page, you'll see if I add milk out here, it gets that whole functionality where I can strike it off and strike it back on. But I still can't delete it because this is still using the click functionality. So again, just use UL, UL, and you go on. Then you want to see that you want to listen for a click, and then you specify the element that you want to actually put the listener on, or the functionalities of the listener on, and we want to put it on the span. And now we just save it. Okay, now let's add milk again, and this time we can also strike it off and strike it back off, and we can also delete it. So yep, we're done with all the functionalities that we started off with. So all that's left now is actually creating the CSS for it, which is, in my opinion, the most tiresome part, because I really hate CSS, because there are so many different frameworks to actually help you out through CSS, like Bootstrap. But in this video, we're not actually going to be using Bootstrap. We're going to be doing it through pure CSS. So this will give us a bunch of practice on some new stuff. Okay, so now that we're done with the functionality, let's just head over to our CSS file and let's start coding. So first of all, let's target this container part, right? Because as you see, our to-do list is kind of centered. it's all in the center. It doesn't really have a big width. Let me show you how big this width is. So you select the container by going hashtag container because it's an ID. Now if you were to give it a background of say F7, 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 which is a slight gray, you'll see how big this thing is. So it's this big. If you guys can see, it's still here. Let me just make it full screen. Let's close this out. Yeah, so this is how big it is. So we don't really want that. So let's set a width first. So our width is going to be around 360 pixels. And let's also set a max height. So our max height is going to be 500 pixels. Okay, let's see how that looks now. Fine, so our height and width have been set to almost an identical feature. Now all we need to do is center it in the position that it's meant to, like in the center of the screen. Now a really neat way to do that is by adding some margins. So you go margin. So let's add some margin like around 100 pixels on the top and the bottom, and auto, which means equal amounts on the left and right. So that will completely center it for us. Now let's see. Yep, it's centered, and that's exactly where you want it to be. You add new stuff and it keeps adding there. Okay, another thing that I want you to notice is that this thing doesn't really have a border. Instead, let me just zoom in. This thing has something called a box shadow. If you look out here, there's a slight shadow element that you can see. I'm not sure if it's very visible on your screen, but if you're coding along, you can just zoom in and see that there's a slight shadow going for us. So we can create that with the box shadow property in CSS. So let me just show you how that's done. So let's see. Let's zoom in out here first. So this is what it looks like without any box shadow. Right. Now let's add some box shadow now. So we go box shadow. Box shadow. And this is going to take 3 parameters, actually 4. Firstly, the XYZ axis and how much distance they'll cover in pixels, points, or ems, whatever unit you prefer. And then the color of the box shadow. So let's do that. So first is going to be 0 pixels on the Y, and 3 pixels on the Z axis. And it's going to have a color of RGBA. So the A stands for the opacity part, mind you. So it's going to be 0, 0, 0. And let's give it an opacity of 0.3. So that's very, very slight. Now this is what it looks like without any box shadow. Now watch as I reload. It has this nice little shadow going for it, and it looks much neater, right? Okay, so that's done with the container. Now the next thing that we're going to target is this to-do list part. So this is the H1. So basically, let's go and select the H1 in our CSS. Firstly, what we see is this is aligned in the center. So we go text align center, right? This should put everything in the center. Yep. Next, we also need a background, which is this really soothing blue color that we have going on. So I already know the code for that color, so just write it down. So our background is going to be 298 0B9. Let's save that. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, we have that cool blue color now. Also, we see that this text is in white. It looks much better than the black. So let's just say color is going to be white. Right? So that'll change all our colors to white. Next, what you see is this, that all the things are in uppercase. Now, a very nifty way to do that through CSS is the text transform property. And all you have to say is uppercase. You save it, and voila, everything turns to uppercase. We also need to give some padding to this element. So our padding is going to be around 10 pixels on the top and bottom, and 20 pixels on the side. I'm sorry for my cough, guys. So yeah, so this is how our H1 is looking like now. Now you also see that it's our to-do list part is not really bolded, but since it's an H1, it's already bolded, and the font size is also not that big. So let's handle that now. So first of all, we are going to say font weight is normal, or you could also say font weight is 400, which will just now make it a normal font weight. Also, font size will be around, let's say, 25 pixels. Let's see how that changes everything. So that's the to-do list now. Next is we are going to remove the margins and say it's going to have 0 margins. Yep, so that removed the margin, and now our input part is completely stuck to this H1. Okay, so we're getting close. Okay, the next thing that we're going to target or attack with our CSS is this input part. So we want to make it look something like this. So let's get started. The first thing that we notice is that this has a background of this gray color. So let's do that first. So input, firstly, let's add some background. So our background is going to be hashtag F7, F7, and F7. So it's the gray that we selected out here. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working. Okay, wait. It's because I selected input incorrectly. So you go input, and you say background is hashtag F7, 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 semicolon, end it properly, and this should turn to gray now. Yep, now we have the gray that we wanted. Next thing that we realize is this input part goes all the way across this to-do list, while ours is just halfway. So we can really easily do that with the width property. We go width is 100%. So now it'll cover 100% of our to-do list. Fine. Next, let's add some padding and make it as large as it should be. So our padding is going to be 13px on the top, 13px on the side, 13px on the bottom, and 20px on the left. So this is what our new task looks like, our new input bar looks like. And if you see, this is really ugly. It's not as beautiful as this because it's really everything goes out. But you could also be questioning that I already set the width to 100%, then why is this happening? Well, when you actually set the width to 100% and you remember the CSS box model, which is basically content, then padding, then border, then margin, we are only setting the width of the content to be 100%. So CSS doesn't really understand what you're doing with the padding. Now, without actually fiddling with our padding, if we want to actually put the input part right with the box, we have this property called a box sizing. So we go box sizing and we say box border or border box. That's how it goes. And you'll see it perfectly fits in the box now. Yep. Also, we'll be giving this a border, a very invisible border, and you'll see why. So our border is going to be 3 pixels, it's going to be solid, and it's going to have an RGBA of 0, 0, 0, and 0. So basically this is like an invisible border, and it'll make things look very neat. So now our to-do list is starting to look something like this. Okay, again, we also have to set the color, because when we type out here it's black, and when we type out here it's this nice little blue. So we can say color is going to be this color, which we set for the background. Copy that down, paste it out here, and now you should be typing in blue. So that's my name, and yep, let's get typed in blue. We also need to set the font size, so let's set that to around 20 pixels, because the font is relatively bigger when you're typing in. You see this font is much bigger. Yeah, so we need to do that here too. So we save it and we reload, and our font is big enough. Fine. Next, what I also want you to notice is when we actually focus on the part out here, we get this nice little border. While out here, we get this shitty little outline from Chrome. We really don't want that. It looks very bad. So we can use some pseudo selectors. So you go input and you go focus. So focus is the pseudo selector. So basically when you're typing in, that's when you're focusing. So you go border is 3px solid, and this color. We'll be using this color extensively. So that's the color. Our next objective is to actually remove the outline. So the outline is this weird little blue part that you see also. So you'll see what I mean. So we're going to say outline is going to be none, right? And also, when we're typing out here, it's normally gray when we're not typing, but when we're typing, it turns to white background. So all we have to say is background is going to be white. Let's save that, and let's see if it works exactly how we planned it. So now when we go here, we get this nice little border, our background becomes white, we get the placeholder, and we can add in stuff. So we are slowly but surely getting where we want to. Okay, the next thing that we're going to target is the unordered list in itself. So we're going to make it look something like this, where the rows have some nice spacing and some nice padding. So let's do that first. So select your UL. Right. Now, what you see out here, we still get these bullet points, while here it's just a clear thing. So to set that, all you have to do is list style is none. So list style is none. Also, we want to give a margin of 0 and a padding of 0. So this will make it look something like this. It's all gone now. So the bullet points are gone, and now this is sticking right out here. Okay, now let's target the list items individually, because they need some spacing and some padding of their own. So first of all, let's give it a background of white. Next, you want the height of all the LIs to be around 40 pixels. So let's save and see what that looks like. Okay, now we have this nice little LIs going for us with the white background, and they have some nice spacing. Okay. So next we also want to set the line height. So line height is going to be around 40 pixels too. So our text is not like this on the top, gets centered in the line. So now that's done. Next we also need a color, because it's not exactly black, it's going to be red. So our color is going to be E47373. So now if you do that, our color has been set to red. So red means you've not done your task. When you click on it, it becomes green, and that's how it's going to work. Also, all the tasks are actually centered, so let's do that too. So text align is going to be center. So now that we've done that, yep, our text is all in the center. Now if you also notice, every other list item has this nice little gray background, while the other ones have this white background. Now we can easily do that with another pseudo selector, which so li and nth child, and we specify 2n. So basically this will take all the nth child of 2n, basically all the even numbers, and we want to give it a background of, let's say, that gray background that we've constantly been using, the F7, F7, F7. So let's see now. And yep, we have this alternating background. If you add something new, that's going to be gray, the next one's going to be white. Let me zoom out a bit. Yeah, so you can see. Yep, so that's how it's going to work. Now, we also need to actually, okay, so I'm not actually made you aware of this, but see, if you keep on adding some tasks, this gets a scroll bar, while if you do it out here, this actually gives our page a scroll bar, which is not really convenient, right? We want it to look something neat like this. We want to go through our task like this. So this can be very easily achieved. So first of all, let's give this div ID a task. Okay, we've already given this ID a task. So let's select that ID. So we say task. And we're going to say that the max height is going to be 500 pixels. Or let's make it smaller actually. Let's make it 400 pixels. And we're going to say overflow is auto. Now, if you actually go ahead and start typing in stuff, we'll reach a max height of 400, and then you get a scroll bar. So that's how overflow auto works. So now that we have got that thing going, next what we want to do is actually set the font. Okay, now that we've come to the font that I'm using out here is called Roboto. So Roboto is actually available as a Google font. So to download that, all you have to do is go to Google font, click on the first link. You have to add the font as your style. So we're going to use Roboto out here. You're free to use whatever you want actually. So click on the plus and go out here, go to customize, and you want to select the regular, you want to select medium, and you also want to select bold. Now go to embed, click on this link, copy it down, go to your HTML and just paste it there. So this is going to be our font. Now you select the body and you say the font entirely is going to be font family is going to be Roboto. So let's see, the font is like this, and now we have the exact same font that is out here. Okay, now the last part that remains is actually animating our trash cans. Well, that is probably the trickiest part of this whole thing. So it's something really ingenious. So first of all, we need to add this framework called Font Awesome to our project. So Font Awesome, let me Google that out for you. So Font Awesome, what exactly is Font Awesome? Well, Font Awesome is a CSS library that gives you a bunch of icons and CSS to play around with. Now you can also download Font Awesome locally and then include it into your project, but just for variety's sake, I'm gonna use a CDN link. So you go Font Awesome and you type the CDN. I already have it here, so let me just do that once. You take this link, so that's the link to Font Awesome, and you also have to add it. So you go add a link tag and the href, you just paste that there. Fine. So how exactly does Font Awesome work? So let's see. Font Awesome icon. So what are we using? We are using Font Awesome version 4.7. So let's look at the 4.7 icons. So basically, whenever we want to actually use an icon, we can go here and search. Okay, I think I'm on the wrong link. Wait, there's a place you can actually see. Font Awesome 4.7 icons. Yeah, let's see that. Yeah. Okay, these are all the icons. And if you were to go and search for a trash icon, so yeah, you see this trash icon out here? This is the one that I've exactly used here. So go ahead and click on it, and you'll see to include the trash item, all we need to do is include an I tag, which stands for icon, with a class called FA trash, and that will include it into our HTML. So let's go ahead. Okay, now let's delete all these squiggly little lines that denoted our trash can for so long, and let's actually put in our trash can. Let's save that. Let's see. Okay, now we have this cute little trash can going, but we still need to actually make it like this. It's got this red background and it's white in color. Okay, so to do that, firstly, let's go into our spans and add a class so that we can actually style all this together. So you go class and you say, let's call this class delete. Let's save it. Now let's come out here and select our delete. So you go dot delete, I'm sorry, and let's get on with it now. So firstly, let's give it a red background. So background is going to be, just take down this code. This is the color of the background. So it's E7 4C3C. Yeah, that's the color. So let's see if that works. Yeah, we have the red background going, but still not exactly as we want it to be. So there's much more to add. So first of all, we make the color white. Next, let's give it a height of 40 pixels, which is exactly the height of our li, so it'll fill it up completely. Let's make the text align center. Now you have to realize that the text out here is basically this trash can icon. So it's a span, so that's going to be the text, right? So text align, we'll say center. Next, let's save this and see what happens. So now we have a white color trash icon with some red background, and it's centered into this little red background that we have. It's really minimal to notice, but it's necessary. Next, what we want to do is give it the width of also 40 pixels. Let's give it a width of 40 pixels. Okay, it's not really there yet. Let's float it to the left because it should be on the left. Also, we want to create the display and say it's inline block. Okay, now we have these beautiful little icons. So this is exactly how these look like, but still there's no animation. So what is the logic of our animation? So what I have exactly done is, when you're hovering over this, I get the width to be 40 pixels, and when you're not hovering over this, I set the width to 0. And just with the transition property, we can make this transition happen, which takes a little time. So let's see how that works. So first of all, what you need to do is, you say whenever you're hovering over the li, you want to select the span and say the width is going to be 40 pixels. Let's see if that works, and set the width out here to 0. So let's see. Yeah, now they have disappeared, but once we hover over them, this thing kind of comes in. But if you notice, if I zoom in out here, you can see that you can still make out this weird little white trash icon out there. Now that's really bad. So we can actually handle that by putting in some opacity. So you say that the opacity is going to be 0, right? And when it's revealed, the opacity is going to be 1.0, which is completely visible. So let's try that out now. Now it's invisible, but when you hover over it, these things come along and you can add stuff to it. Okay, now if you realize, this is a transition, so we need to make that happen. So that's pretty easy. All you need to say is transition, and let's give it a time. How much time do we want? So 0.5 seconds, and it's going to be a linear transition, so basically equally throughout. Now you see this beautiful animation come to life, and we have it going for us. Okay, so that's almost taken care of everything. Said we have this background, but you can put in any background you want. But the last thing that we actually want to tackle is this plus part. So let's add that plus thing first. Let's go back to Font Awesome and search for the plus icon. So let's see. I want the addition icon. So I've used this already. Let's use this one, or a plus square. Actually, let's use this one. So to add this to our HTML, all we have to do is put this icon tag. So copy that down, go to your HTML, and it's beside the h1. So first of all, we need it to be an inline element. So understand, we need to put it in span. So you go span, and then you paste it in. Let's give our span an ID. Let's call it plus, right? Because we need to select the span to actually handle it in the JavaScript. Now let's see. This should be adding. Yep. So first of all, our plus needs to be on the far end. So that can be done with a simple thing. All you have to say is plus, select that, and you say float is right, float it to the right, and then you make the margin on the right 0. So let's reload that, and our plus is now floated to the right. But if we click it, there's no functionality. So head over to your JavaScript file, and let's say this is going to be toggling the input form, right? So what we need to do is select our span or our plus. So our span had the ID of plus, so that's what we're going to select. Say plus. You want to add a listener, so we go with the click one because it's a static element. Pass in your callback function, and all you want to do is you want to select your input and you want to toggle it. So you could say fade toggle. That's the wrong spelling, so fade toggle, and that should set up everything for us. So now if you click this, this goes out, and if you click it back again, it comes back in. You put in anything, it gets added. Oh, we also forgot one thing. So if you add something new, this doesn't really get the icon. So for that, you have to go into your append method out here. Go ahead and copy this entire thing. Control C, and you basically want the same code to be there. Okay, so just to avoid any sort of miscommunication between the DOM and our browser, we are going to replace these with single quotes. Single quotes out here too, and single quotes out here. And let's save it. Now if you add something like milk, so also remove this thing. Yeah, so we want to add the task. Let's reload this. So when we add milk now, it gets this neat little icon, and it also works. So basically what we saw is that we recreated this entire to-do list, and now we can say that we've created the JS, we've created the CSS, and we've created the HTML. So we can basically delete off everything from this list. And you basically learned how to create a very simple CRUD app, which is basically create, read, update, and delete through jQuery. Okay guys, so that was it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed today's session. If you have any questions or doubts regarding today's video or regarding the code, please post them down in the live chat or the comment section. Until next time, goodbye.